Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following presentation by Mark Amerika on May the 9th, 2023 took place during our meeting entitled Creativity, AI Art and Copyright. For future meetings, check out our meetup group and also our website at RMAIIG.org.
So I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Mark Amerika. He's an artist, theorist, novelist, and professor of art and art history. His digital artwork has been exhibited at the Whitney Biennial of American Art, as well as the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. His current exhibition, Mark Amerika Remixing Reality, 1993 to 2023, is on view at the Marlborough Gallery in Barcelona, Spain. He just returned from an international tour at various exhibits. He's the author of many books, including his most recent, My Life as an Artificial Creative Intelligence. He's going to speak on the use of AI image generation tools as a professional artist and his life and work as a creative. Please join me in welcoming Mark Amerika. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm going to share my screen as well. Thanks, everybody, for coming to the event today. Going to lay the slideshow here. Okay, does everybody see that okay? Excellent, thanks. So yeah, as Dan said, I just got back to Boulder after 2 months in Iberia, where I was installing and supporting 2 solo exhibitions of my digital artwork. So the first show took place. You see, this first image is the cover of the catalog for my exhibition that Dan just mentioned, Remixing Reality, at the Marlborough Gallery in Barcelona. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Marlborough Gallery, or even say modern art history to a degree for that matter, I want to give you some context, because the gallery itself is one of the first mega galleries. Okay, so it started in London in 1946, almost 80 years ago, and it has branches in New York and Spain. And really, over the last 80 years, it's exhibited and represented, artists who most of us are familiar with. I'll just mention a few: Claude Monet, Camille Pissarro, Botero, Louise Bourgeois, Henry Moore, and Francis Bacon, who was the inaugural exhibition for the gallery in Spain, which is where I have my show up right now. So I'm mentioning this not so much to drop names, even though I'm dropping names, but because my exhibition right now is actually the first one that the gallery has ever put on that is from an artist who works exclusively with digital processes. And I think that this is kind of a signal that, there are other signals too, but for me, it's a signal that we're in the early stages of a kind of significant transition in art, in the art world, the art market. And this is thanks to the evolution of digital art in the context of the internet, software, generative processes, AI, and to some degree, even NFTs and the blockchain. So something that I, as an artist, have always been interested in is seeing what the technology is generally being programmed to do, and then to kind of try to find ways to make it do something else. I'm actually an aficionado of Flusser myself, and have included him in a few of my books. And Flusser, in his book Toward a Philosophy of Photography, says that really the artist is more kind of like a player of information, who in some ways needs to show contempt for the apparatus and make it work against itself. And that's something that I'm interested in. Try to make the technology do something that it wasn't necessarily supposed to do, even if that means intentionally breaking it or glitching it, or even tricking it by pushing the software and the CPU as far as they can go. So I'll show you another image. That's just me in front of the gallery there in Barcelona. And then here's an image of some of the glitch videos that are on exhibit there right now. So in addition to glitching the technology for aesthetic effect, I'm also very interested in, for example, conceptual forms of digital art. So some of the AI works in the Barcelona show are made via human AI symbiosis, and they have very basic yet solid conceptual framework behind them. So these are the videos, still the glitch videos, and now I'm going to take you on a little scenic route through some of the AI works that are in this high-end commercial gallery. These works are called watermarks. I wonder if anybody's already picking up why they might be called watermarks. So if you look at a few of them here, you'll maybe be able to pick up on my conceptual gesture or gesture, where I'm using those kind of like horrible Dolly 2 watermarks that they kind of provide at in the lower right-hand corner of all the images that the AI generates. I was sort of an earlier beta tester of it, and that was one of the most frustrating things of all was that. And they even, of course, were claiming copyright for those works and saying you couldn't really commercialize them. They've since changed their tune on that, and maybe we can dig into that a little bit later. But with this particular series, I'm kind of playfully engaging with the idea of a watermark and really what it stands for, but also simultaneously aestheticizing it, trying, because these are digital prints that come with NFTs in the art gallery. And yeah, watermarks, watercolors, and marks, yeah, that's kind of my name in a way too. So my second exhibition running right now is a couple more of those, is taking place in this building, which is in Porto, Portugal. So it's in the center of Porto. It's a site-specific installation of 12 AI animations, and it's located in this historic Hitoria, which is the rectory building, and it's inside something called the Casa Comum Gallery. And that translates usually as common room or common house or communal meeting space. And because it's in the center of this mid-sized European city, it gets a lot of random foot traffic, which I love because, I know for a fact that this will be the first time that a lot of folks who pass through the gallery will be seeing this symbiotic human AI art in a public space. So these are two very different kinds of exhibitions where AI, is now very present in Iberia right now. And so this would be the groovy, animated GIF that's floating around social for this exhibition, which is, so the first one was called Remixing Reality. Oddly enough, this one's called Abducted Realities, and we can think about maybe AI as a kind of, well, that we could talk about that. Is it really abducting our reality? So I'm going to also start just showing you a few other images that are actually in the exhibition in Porto. And these will loop and I'll change them as we go along. But what you're looking at, these images were created using a customized notebook on Google Colab. And, it's interesting as I float around and read different articles about AI, I'm noticing that folks think that it's sometimes referred to as like lazy art or something like that, because folks seem to think it's just so easy to make these images. But it's not as easy as it looks, actually. It's not just about plugging a few words into a prompt or as a prompt and then pushing play. I mean, you can do that, and sometimes you may be impressed with what you get. But I want to be clear that for me, working with new AI models and customized notebooks requires endless hours of experimentation. This one's called Visitation. The first one was called Abduction. So why is that? Something that most digital artists are aware of, no matter what software they work with, is that each program, each system has its own, I'll personify a little bit, has its own personality. And so like all of us, it's good at some things, maybe great at some things, okay at others, and not so great at most things. So just like forming relationships with people, And for me, getting to know an AI model also requires a kind of like gradual getting to know you interrelationship. Uh, I'm talking about, of course, with these like, right, we're talking about programs and systems, the ones that, we're inter and intra acting with, even as we try to, stretch them, or in my case, really tease out their creative potential. So this is something that I experienced also, I'll just, as a side note, as a vocalist in an experimental sound art ensemble here in Boulder about 25 years ago, where we would spend hours and hours finding, inventive ways to collaboratively jam with each other, every time we got together in a new session or for a new session. And so I see these kind of improvisational and at times even intimate call and response, input output moments with the various AI models as sessions. Okay, so you could even call them jam sessions. Now, this is a lot different than, working with, say, Adobe Creative Cloud, and all the other proprietary software makers that digital artists use to make their work. And of course, those kinds of software systems and platforms are already, strategizing ways to integrate more advanced forms of AI into their systems. And so as these integrated AI systems become more like co-conspirators, let's call them, in the expanding fields of digital art making and distribution, I think artists will also become more codependent on them, over time, more and more codependent on them. So to give you an example, already I find myself going into the studio and unconsciously auto-syncing or pairing with my AI models as if they were my studio assistants, creating what Rosie Bredati refers to as machinic autopoiesis, right? A kind of a convergent creative synthesis that establishes a qualitative link between, let's say, organic matter and technological or machinic artifacts. And that really results in kind of a radical redefinition of machines as both intelligent and generative. We throw these words around, but we're really laying something heavy on these instruments that we now find ourselves symbiotically interrelating with. So what makes the creative process of meta jamming with AI systems so intriguing to me, as well as a little cautious as I proceed, is that actually we don't know where we're going or what we're doing. We don't know where it's headed, how it will all turn out in the immediate years ahead. And this is something that, of course, as an artist, fascinates me. I don't want to really repeat myself or, do what has already been done. As a professional artist who works with, at times, these advanced technologies, of course, I'm aware of many of the ethical issues around AI, so-called, and these buzzwords are important, and you can just follow up with me or just look them up on Google, but like extractive capitalism, I think is important, algorithmic bias, surveillance capitalism, and all these dystopian apocalyptic sci-fi scenarios that, that used to be entertaining as B-grade movies, but are now on the cusp of possibly staring us in the face as a real-time documentary of our present day existence. We can leave, that's one kind of like, worst case scenario, or there's quite a few of them. We could actually use AI to generate many of these worst case scenarios for us. But on the other hand, I'm also concerned, actually, after having worked with it for a few years, that right now, many AI models are actually being trained to mimic very predictable modes of creative conformity. So one problem I already see emerging is that some AI systems are becoming too predictable, too efficient, and too conformist. And the danger I see here is that the more we meld our artistic practice or practices with these systems of creative conformity, the more these interactions will close the door, right? Close the doors of our own imaginative potential, because we train ourselves and or are trained by these AI others, or we could be, to think, create, and behave in a pre-programmed way, a way that we have been trained to adapt to or behave. One that's very much driven by the AIs who are now getting to know us and try to change us to be more like them, right? To conform to their model of art making. But this creative conformity, whether it's via AI or more traditional art mediums, and I see that in the art school context that I'm a professor in all the time, uh, it's something that I actually resist because I'm interested in artistically and philosophically hacking it. Again, I hadn't planned on talking about Flusser, but pointing back to him to in a way show contempt for the apparatus and try to make it work against itself. Because really, what's our option here? I mean, is it possible that digitally inclined artists will soon begin operating less like artists and more like technicians watched over by machines of loving grace, which is, of course, a reference to a Richard Brautigan short story? Here's a thought. Okay, let's take the term AI artist. Okay, so while I was in Portugal showing all these AI works, someone asked me, they said, "Are you an AI artist?" And I was like, well, that's a pretty tricky term, actually. AI artist could mean artist whose medium is AI, but it could also mean the AI itself is an artist, in which case the humanoid programmer and or prompt engineer is now relegated to becoming a creative tool to help the model realize its full aesthetic potential. Now, am I really bothered by that? I mean, I'm looking at some of the images that I've been generating and the way they look on some of the screens that I've been showing around Europe this spring, and I'm quite happy and content with this symbiotic relationship thus far that I've been developing with the AI. So the idea of creative AI, then creative AI, right, is a term where we talk about creatives using AI as a tool to generate content in whatever form for whatever uses they may have for it. I'm thinking it could kind of get flipped on its head, so that now the creative tool is actually the human creative who is already composing work based off what the model, oftentimes a corporate model, is already embedded into the relationship by targeting certain images, words, tags, values, behaviors, etc., that influence the outputs of the creative process. So that's what I mean by the term AI artist being tricky. Why in the world would we want to work with an advanced AI that's been trained in such a way that it overcompensates in its attempt to achieve some kind of alignment with a predetermined data set of anthropocentric human values? I mean, whose human values? For me, that would be too close for comfort. It reminds me of another experience I had in the mid 90s when I was one of the lead plaintiffs represented by the ACLU to counter all of these internet censorship laws that were popping up all over the country in different states through different legislatures and being signed by governors. And I was trying to determine if I, as an American, were constitutionally protected to upload, say, my erotic poetry to the internet from here in Boulder, even if it didn't necessarily meet the so-called community standards of a small town, say in Tennessee, one that might identify itself as like hardcore evangelical Christian. And so for me, always making artwork in the pursuit of freedom and yes, also pleasure is a goal. And maybe it's the artist's role to break open AI's virtual head, right? To crack its conceptual kernel until it reveals an alternative state of mind that presently does not exist. So finally, I just want to end by saying that last May, almost exactly a year ago, I published a book titled My Life as an Artificial Creative Intelligence, where I asked the question, is it possible that creative artists have more in common with machines than we might think? And what I do in the book is engage in a kind of improvisational writing, remix, jam session with GPT-2, actually, because the language model available to me during the first year of the pandemic, which is when I wrote it, was GPT-2. At the end, it was GPT-3 as well. It's the inaugural title in the Sensing Media series at Stanford University Press. And I guess I would say for those who are looking, at the creative potential of some of these large language models like Chat GPT and now GPT-4, I think it's worth checking out. It's an early interrogation into the possibility that maybe our unconscious neural mechanism, the one that enables us to intuitively generate creative modes of expression, may itself be a kind of non-human function. And in the book, I call it this non-human function an onto-operational presence with an otherworldly aesthetic sensibility. And I'm borrowing from a lot of different philosophers as I read through this, including Alfred North Whitehead and Willem Flusser, someone else named Yuk Hui, Yukhui, really interesting contemporary philosopher who has a book out now called Cosmotechnics that looks at AI and art. And so, what is this non-human function? And is it in fact one that is strategically designed to reveal the poetic attributes of programmable worlds still to come? And I guess I'll just end it there. So thanks.